Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvat. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. So, Emily, why don't you share with us what is the one thing you got wrong when you started your FinOps career?
Good question. I think the one thing that I got wrong when I started FinOps was focusing the conversation on saving cost only. And it was largely because of how I got into FinOps to begin with, which was nearly 8 years ago before I knew it was even called FinOps. And I just had a growing challenge around cloud costs that I had to solve, and a challenge set to me by leadership that we needed to solve our cloud cost problem because it was growing. And so when I first started looking at FinOps or cloud cost optimization back then, it was purely about saving cost and not about broadening the conversation about the cost is there, but are we actually getting value out of it? Is this cost logical and optimized? And is it actually generating a good outcome for our business? And so I think that's the biggest issue that I had when I first started with FinOps.
Okay, that's very interesting. And you feel like today you drive the conversation a lot more around business value versus cost saving. That's where you're taking things.
Yeah, definitely. It's very much more focused on value. Shifting the conversation away from why is it costing so much is something that generates a culture of understanding and actually making sure that we're getting the value out of something. I think inherently, as soon as you ask somebody, why is it costing so much, there's such negative connotations, and that negativity starts to build this culture of blame and name and shame, which can be really, really easy to build up in FinOps when you're looking at the wrong thing. But shifting away from that, why is it costing so much in a negative connotation, and trying to understand actually what value is that cost generating, and is that the right value for our organization, starts to build a much better culture and a much better understanding of the cloud. So I run the data platforms at Suncorp. That was my core role when I first started at Suncorp. And for anyone who runs data platforms, you will know that they are typically the top of naughty lists when it comes to cloud cost reports. They are very memory intensive, compute intensive. They love to store data. The more data, the better outcomes you can generate for your business. But it means that they are often at the top of that list. And focusing only on the costs that they were incurring on our general ledger wasn't really focusing on the value that these platforms were also generating for our organization. Our data platforms underpin all decisions that we make. They underpin the personalization that we put in place for our customer. They now underpin a lot of our AI outcomes. So they generate huge volumes of value for our organization. And as soon as we started to shift the conversation away from, man, they cost a lot of money and why are they costing so much, to, well, this is the platform that does all of our predictive modeling for natural hazard events and actually let us know when a natural hazard is going to impact our customer. And this is the cost of that platform. And it increased because we had a natural hazard on it at that time. It became a much more constructive conversation. And frankly, some of the conversations just stopped because it was, this is the cost of the platform, and that is the cost of delivering this outcome for our customers. And that's okay. That's a cost that we accept.
So how do you look at it today? So it's not about presenting the data and the problems. What else you need to do as a FinOps leader?
Yeah, so I think it's finding the right metrics to the audience that you're presenting on. If you're presenting to the C-suite, they're probably not going to care about tagging compliance, but they're going to care a lot about the percent of unallocated spend in their environment. If they can't attribute, that spend to a business unit, a business service, a business entity, whatever you call it, that's a major problem for them. And I think the second thing is connecting business value to every action that you're taking, whether it's helping companies increase their margin, or whether you're talking about they've got 50 hours of developer time to spend in a sprint. What makes the most sense to return the most value to the business? In FinOps, we certainly care very much about our remit of saving money, but we don't really, a lot of people don't stop and take what that full picture looks like, right? They could be spending time on developing new features that brings in a lot more revenue than spending time on cleaning up resources or idle waste in their environments. So it's really about balancing, your priorities with the business priorities and come to kind of an alignment on what's going to return the most value for that business unit, that product, or that service.
Yeah. Wow. I have so many questions on what you said right now, but let's take it one by one. First of all, business value. Let's open it up because a lot of people bring this topic to the podcast, and I think there is a lot in there. So when you say business value, does that mean like showing what revenue is generated from this spend, or it's also about other type of value? For example, um, this new feature or new model is helping us with retention, helping us with position ourselves as innovative. So do you go to revenue or you go beyond to other value you're getting from the cloud investment?
Yeah, I think, we're a SaaS company, the company I work at. So, margin is always the most important thing for us. But I think it's important to realize that it can go beyond revenue. And sometimes FinOps people like to be command and control. And sometimes it's more about being an enabler in a situation like the race to AI, right? So every company wants to enable AI. They want to use AI. It's the hottest thing on the market right now. So sometimes it's more about how do we enable the right dashboards and data sources to show where we're spending our time in money in AI, and rather than tie it to like what are you actually getting on your return for AI. So sometimes we don't yet understand that return on investment. So we just need to enable teams to kind of utilize new technology and figure out what that return on their investment is. So sometimes it's not about controlling those costs. It's about enabling people to understand the data behind the money that they're spending and the business value that's hopefully driving for their organization.
And that's a really interesting insight. So you're basically talking about, hey, I can also show the organization that our investment goes on innovation and that we're actually investing in AI, which is something that is a strategic initiative in the company. When you go to the executives you talked about earlier and you don't talk to them about tagging compliance, okay, I get that. Do you also share with them, hey, look, we're investing more in AI now thanks to reallocating a budget or reallocating spend to AI services or infrastructure?
Yeah, and we also try to go a layer deeper, right? You're enabling with your development teams with maybe AI-enabled IDEs or code generation. So you think that's great, but how does that attribute itself to business value? Are we seeing more commits, more features? Are we seeing less errors in our code, less pipeline failures because our code is better and hopefully our velocity is getting better? So we try and take it a layer deep beyond just reporting, we're spending X dollars per engineer, trying to connect it to that next layer of business context that we spent X dollars per engineer on these code generation or optimization tools, but we're actually getting in return features out to our customers quicker. Our pipelines are failing less because our code is cleaner and developers are able to commit, make more commits and less time in between those commits because they're accelerated by those AI tools. So just showing the cost you're spending per engineer on a tool like that doesn't really connect to that second layer of business context, which is really the most important thing to any kind of leadership or executive team.
That's great. And when we're talking about what's interesting for executives, do you find executives care about optimization? Do you share the optimization efforts? How much was saved? Is that part of your presentation?
Yeah, we certainly, share that, but I think the element they care about the bottom line, they care about their gross margin and how it affects the goals that they have to, report up to the board. So I think that's a, interesting one. Those I think KPIs are constantly changing, but you can't present every KPI to every team you present to. So you really got to find the ones that hit home, best for them. And it's really things like what's my unallocated spend? How does this affect my cloud gross margin? And I think this maybe the tertiary thing is it's you explain to them, we did all these optimization efforts, but spend went up in the cloud. So how do you separate out your customer growth, your business as usual, your expansions into new regions to serve your customers from like the savings that you actually achieve? So one thing we really like to focus on is anytime there's a cost optimization opportunity, or we're rolling out a new feature or expanding to a new region, we have a separate dedicated tracking program with lots of great automated dashboards and Slack integration that can tell people and extrapolate that out from just normal growth or customer acquisition, and show that this is the cost that was driven up by this new feature, or this was the cost that was saved by an optimization project or opportunity.
When I tell people about, hey, FinOps and we help save money, they're like, oh, it's a no-brainer. Like everyone should be on top of it. And I'm curious, like, what are your insights about this resistance? Like, why do people in the organization are not so excited to do FinOps just as much as we do?
That's an interesting question, and I talk to my peers a lot in the FinOps community, and I think part of it is maybe not understanding, or a lot of people think it's just about saving money, right? And I think if you look at FinOps, there's very much a technical aspect, and then there's the finance aspect, right? And typically, the personas that you're talking to, they'll either fall on one side of the fence, right? So if they're technical, they may not fully understand the finance side of FinOps, like, I can't predict my spend. Well, you probably need budgets and forecasts to do that, or anomaly detection. Or then if you talk to somebody on the finance side, I can't keep track of what's happening over here, or projects or migrations, or, the finance side might be frustrated because the numbers are all over the place and I can't predict. And, all this unplanned spend is coming up for marketplace purchases. So I think it depends on, who you're talking to, and you have to have a value statement. I think that's probably my new kind of catchphrase for FinOps is, if people don't see the value in what you're doing, it will be very hard for them to want to get on board, right?
Yes.
I think that's your pay dirt, right? When you can get to that, and I think that's when I saw people trying to turn the corner, is what is the value? I always say, what's your elevator pitch if you get stuck with the CEO or the CFO in the elevator? How do you articulate, what do I do here? And how am I delivering value? And I think that transcends to a bunch of different careers and disciplines. But I think for FinOps per se, and I also, one of my best mentors in the FinOps community, Kim Ware from Target, says it needs to be FinOps plus something else. Sometimes FinOps can't stand on itself alone. So if you can find something that you can attach to FinOps. So is it FinOps and AI, or FinOps and, something else, right? Or security, but FinOps, I feel like the more people I talk to and the more that I work in this industry and I work with people, sometimes people can't see the value unless you attach the framework to something else, to a philosophy or a product or a technology, right?
For sure. You actually said a few very, very fascinating things. The first thing that I'm also taking from what you said, on top of the insights you shared, is the fact that you should also identify the pain points of the stakeholders. Like this finance guy you talked about, he was having a really hard time reporting on these costs. He needed help. This engineer, he wants to do AI better, so he needs someone to help to guide him through how to use it. So how do you do that? Like, how do you identify the pain point and actually lead a discussion around that?
At least for me, when I'm implementing FinOps, or, I'm going to a new stakeholder, I try and do an assessment. So I'm very curious, and I probe, and I ask more questions probably than I do talk, and I just listen a lot. And so by probing and by really trying to understand, what's your wish list? Like, if you had a wish list, like, and then if they don't necessarily give me maybe some of the wishes that I think they need, then I'll start kind of planning some ideas. So kind of, like, well, so what I'm hearing is, and then I'll throw some things out there. But I think first you have to kind of do an assessment. I love to say a maturity assessment of where is everybody, or, if they've got some of the capabilities and domains in place, trying to figure out how to fill in the blanks. But everybody, I think when you listen to people and you probe and you really try and understand what their pain points are, they really open up to you. And that's where you get all of your data, for your assessment. And then you can kind of come back and go, okay, like, here's where we need to start. and here are my recommendations. But you get so much information going out and talking to people and asking questions because those of us that have been in FinOps for a long time, we obviously know what we're doing, but FinOps looks different everywhere at different companies in different personas. Like it's a good framework, but you're going to have to modify that to what works in the role or the company or the technology where you are, right?
I need executive sponsorship and also in the right position, because it has happened to me now more than once that I've been hired by the wrong team. Imagine being hired to fix reporting, fix the cost data pipelines and all of that, and not have access to cost data, because that maybe is responsibility of another team. So if you are in the wrong team and have your hands tied and maybe there's office politics, so they're even ghosting you, then yeah, it has happened that it took me almost 4 months to get access to data. And then I was fired because I couldn't reach my performance objectives. So it sounds ridiculous, but that is what happens oftentimes. So I've definitely improved my skills at stakeholder management and also at making sure that I get the working conditions right before I start the job.
Yeah. And double clicking on that, would a CFO buy-in be enough, or you would necessarily look for engineering or IT leadership buy-in as well?
I would say CIO, CFO is preferred because they have the hand on the budget. And a side effect of a good FinOps practice is normally a good cost reduction. So I don't believe in cost optimization as such, because for one simple reason, if you tell cost optimization to someone who has no idea what FinOps is, all of them think cost reduction and that's it. So yeah, if you only optimize for cost, I would say shut down everything, 100% cost saves, where's my bonus? So that's not even what the company wants. But if you go, then you should follow the value, right? And the value realization could even be increasing cloud costs because you are maybe carved to the bone too much and you have service degradation and failure. So you're losing revenue, you're losing customer and market share because you have unhappy customers. So maybe even increasing cloud costs increases the perceived value, the business value of your cloud infrastructure.
Now, Amy, from past conversations we had, I know that you're really big on top-down support for FinOps and the importance for that. Can you share with us your journey to get this top-down executive support for the FinOps program?
Sure. I do 100% believe if you do not have top of the house, not only support, but you need day to day or month to month, you need somebody at the top to be sitting on these calls and making sure that the directive is getting heard by the people who can execute in the cloud. We all know that when we change the strategy from buying hardware, handing it to an engineer and saying, so we would build the business case, we would buy the equipment, we would hand it to someone and they would build it. They never got involved with pricing or cost or anything. Changing that mentality, the way that we did here at Citizens with this migration that we're doing to cloud was huge for our engineers to understand. So if we don't have that top down to say, you now need to focus on optimization, value, efficiency in the cloud, the people that are hands on the keyboard, they're not going to focus on it. They're into now. We're into innovation and the sexy things and the bot here and the this there. They're not going to want to go back and say, oh, wait, I could save X if I just change this. But once you hear the impact of the overall cloud budget to the success of our P&L, you really can put those two things together. So our CIO sits on a call with us every month and he understands everything that's going on. He's talking to the people. He's supporting my team and making sure that people are looking at this. We have a cute little leaderboard. So it looks like a little platform from the Olympics, the gold and the silver. So we have efficiency scores. We have the most optimized apps, and we give out awards for it. And everyone loves that. That's like the last 5 or 10 minutes of the call after everyone's getting yelled at for not doing their optimizations. So everybody loves that part of it. Everybody loves a winner. So if you're the most optimized application, even if you were that because you did something wrong in the beginning, but paying attention to it now and focusing on making those changes is huge in our industry, right? And then we'll take whatever we've done for one app or one set of resources and say, what can we do across the organization? If we did that here, it didn't have a negative effect and the application teams are happy, the end customers are happy. Can we take those learnings and apply them anywhere else in our environment? So we're always looking at it, take the small scale and then bring it out.
Fascinating. And was it easy to get a CIO on a monthly cadence meeting?
At the time, he had another boss who we've reorged. So that boss of his, she was the head of business services. She's no longer there in that role, but she was the one that started this when she started to see the budget variance really getting bigger in cloud. And she had no idea about it or what was going on, but she started to look at it, and then he did, and he got really involved because he's the technology leader at the time, still is, and he took her lead on that, and he just continued. And no, I do have trouble getting other leaders on, but every month he is on that call. He almost never reschedules it unless there's a major thing. No, he is 100% supportive of those calls, and that has changed. That's changed the perspective of our DevOps teams. And now people want to come in and want to work with us. It's become more of a give and take in our world rather than in the beginning, it was us. It was my team always reaching out. Now I have people coming to us saying, what do you think if we do this? How will this affect the cost if we make this change? We saw this in the cloud visualization tools. How do you think that will affect the pricing? And we'll go in and we'll do the analysis for them. We'll get the right people on the call so they can go ahead and make those changes. It's definitely helped us huge.
Nice. It sounds like what moved the needle was the variance of the cloud spend. So it wasn't like, hey, necessarily we have a lot of waste or something like that. It was more around, hey, we need to put it under control. So we need the buy-in of the relevant executive. Is that the way you went about it?
Yeah, we were really forecasting high for the first couple of years. So we were coming in lower, doing optimizations, getting our savings plan and RI strategy down solid. So we knew we were getting the most savings there as well. But we were always coming in under budget until about our third or fourth year in the cloud when the migration really started to hit. And I think a lot of the people who were involved in that work were still on thinking on-prem and didn't really understand the impact of moving this application and running it in the cloud in a DR environment in multiple AZs. They didn't understand how that would affect the cost. So we started to run a little higher than we were forecasting. I mean, it wasn't FinOps forecasting, it's the application team's forecasting. We're just the reporters, right? But we clearly see that there was a lot of education needed. So we started to do a lot of that as well. Lunch and Learns on FinOps. We created a FinOps badge now. So you have to be certified FinOps within our organization. We have something called the Infrastructure Academy. So now FinOps is a huge part of that as well. So we're always trying to promote it and help people understand how what they're building and doing in the cloud, how that literally affects our budget.
That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action.